Hi everyone, my name is Maddie and welcome back to my channel. So the video I have for you today is really long overdue, but it is my favourite books I read in 2019. And I say it's overdue, but I only started posting videos about 2 weeks ago, and so I think it's still fair that even though it's the middle of June 2020 that I post this video, because honestly I loved the books I'm going to tell you about and I would highly recommend anyone to pick them up and I really want to share them with you. So I have 5 books which I'm going to talk about in detail in this video and really talk you through what they were and why I loved them so much. But then I've also got 6 other books which I'll very briefly mention at the end, which are sort of special mentions for books I really liked and think a lot more people should be reading, but aren't necessarily sort of favourites of all time. But they are definitely books I'm sure I'll be talking about at points in future, as they're books I absolutely loved last year. So the 5 books which were my favourite last year, I'm going to talk about in chronological order of the order I read them, as honestly I don't think I could rank them. I think there is a book which would be my number 1, but past that I couldn't rank them, so I'm just going to talk about them in the order I read them throughout the year, because that saves me having to stress about getting them in a ranked order. So let's jump straight into it. What order did I read them in, I wonder? So the first book I read in 2019 that made it to my favourites list was Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. I've been a fan of Seanan McGuire for quite some time, as I absolutely adore the Wayward Children series. That is just a brilliant series with new books coming out every year. So when I heard about this one, I was like, okay, I definitely need to pick that up. It sounds really interesting, it sounds really strange, and also I love her writing, so it's a pretty good bet that I'll probably enjoy it. However, I could not have predicted how deeply I fell in love with this book. To give you a little bit of a plot synopsis, as best I can anyway, this follows 2 twins, Roger and Dodger, fraternal twins, who have sort of been made, but they don't know this. They grow up separately and then all of a sudden start communicating. As far as they know, they just have an imaginary friend, but it turns out that they are twins who've been raised completely separately. And they've been created by this person who basically wants to make gods and use them to rule the world. That's about as much as I can tell you plot-wise, because honestly it is so strange. I'm in dire need of rereading this book because it's so good and written so beautifully, but it's so weird. I use the word weird in the most complimentary sense that it can possibly be meant in. I loved this book and the writing was beyond stunning. I actually have a stupid number of tabs in it because I loved it so much, and that will be a common trend throughout all of these books. And it was just amazing. I think one of my favourite things is how wholly different Roger and Dodger are. So Roger is really skilled with words. He sees the world through language and words, and that's what makes him feel like he can understand everything. Whereas Dodger, she very much communicates with the world through numbers. She's extremely gifted in maths, and that's how she understands and comprehends everything going on. So they're polar opposites and yet the perfect complement to each other. But I also love how that really delves into that topic of sort of people who are left-brained versus right-brained. And that's something that I think hit home for me because my whole family is extremely scientific and mathematical, as am I, but I always grew up slightly more on the creative side and a bit more sort of interested in words and reading, and I do a lot of theatre. So it was really interesting looking at that sort of duality and how it can affect different people and how they see the world. This was quite a chunky book, but honestly, I believe that every single page was necessary. There was so much time spent developing the characters as individuals, as well as absolutely just the beautiful relationship that they had. And there was a lot of sort of time jumps going on within this, so that was really key in sort of seeing them grow. And also the plot. There was a lot of time spent on the development, but once the plot got going, it was fascinating. There was so much to it. As I said, I'm not even sure I fully comprehended what happened in this book. It definitely needs rereading to fully understand it, but it was so amazing anyway. It didn't really make any effect that it was a bit strange or disjointed. It just was brilliant and it read so beautifully, and honestly, I would die for a sequel for this book. It deserves one. I want more of Roger and Dodger. I want to know what the hell happens after the end of this book. But yes, highly recommend, especially if you already like Seanan McGuire and her writing. But if you like slightly strange prose, definitely dual perspective, and just a bit of a crazy plot, but that really focuses on relationships as well as maths versus language, and just a bit of a fantastical, amazing time, if I'm honest, then definitely pick this one up. So the second book to make it onto this list is one that I think I saw on pretty much every single person's favourite of 2019 list, but I couldn't miss it off, and that is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This I actually read directly after Middle Game, so I had a really good reading time right then, and I actually already reread this. I read this both in May and in November last year, and could happily pick it up and read it again right now, honestly. It's such a brilliant book. I'm sure you are all sick to death of hearing about this book, and I'm certain everyone already knows what it is about, but just as a super quick overview, this follows the son of the President of the United States and the Prince of Wales, who end up falling for each other and getting into a relationship, which comes with a whole host of problems, both political and social, and it's just so beautiful and so funny and such an amazing read. So in terms of rep in this book, just really quickly, Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States, is bisexual, and Henry, who is the Prince of Wales, is gay. So it was really nice having sort of both of those, and then in a male-male relationship, and it didn't just focus on sort of one sexuality. And also quite a few of the friends in this book are also LGBT, so there was just a whole ton of representation going on. I think possibly my favourite part about this book, other than the utterly adorable romance, was the comedy. I don't read that many books that are particularly funny, I think because I read a lot of fantasy, which is often quite sort of intense, there's less comedy. But I really enjoyed the comedy aspect of this book. It was so different from other things I've read. I've read a lot of contemporary, I've read quite a lot of romance, and this just stuck out so much and has absolutely stuck with me ever since I first read it. So like Middle Game, this book has been tabbed to death. It's not helped by the fact I've read it twice. I read it the first time, it had a whole ton of tabs and notes in it, and then I read it again and I found even more things I loved, and so I had to put even more in. But it is just a beautiful book. And I think one of the things I loved the most was the friendships and the family dynamics shown in this, especially for Alex, who is very much the character this book centres around. Alex's sister and their best friend are a really close little trio, and I loved watching their relationship when everything was developing throughout the book and the ups and downs, and they're just such a sweet little trio. All of the characters are brilliant. But I think my favourite part is his mum, who is the president. This is in a slightly alternate timeline where the 2016 election went in a different way, and she is actually running to get another term in 2020 in this book. And his relationship with her is just so stunning. She switches from president status to mum status so instantaneously, depending on what the situation requires. And it's really gorgeous to see sort of this strong, powerful working mum instantly switch into mothering mode when something is going wrong. And also she is so funny. I won't say what it is, but for anyone who's read it, there is a PowerPoint presentation in this book, and honestly, it is just top tier comedy, and I love her so much, and I love how she was written. So if you enjoy a really sweet romance and an absolutely hilarious and fun read that also delves into some slightly harder topics, then I would absolutely suggest you pick this one up if you haven't already, because I'm pretty sure everyone on BookTube has already read this by this point, and I'm a little bit late to be recommending it, but either way, I will keep shouting about how much I love this book because it is worth it. Book number 3 on this list is one I've been looking forward to for such a long time, and I was not even remotely surprised when this made it to my favourite books of the year, and that was The Starless E by Erin Morgenstern. The Night Circus is one of my favourite books of all time, so as soon as I heard that Erin Morgenstern was releasing a new book, I was so unbelievably excited, and then I heard about the plot and I just could not contain my absolute excitement. So this follows Zachary, who is a PhD student at university and also is a teaching assistant, and he has a love for video games. And what I love about it though is that they really discuss sort of the similarity and the similar love of video games and reading and books. It's that, you know, delving into a story and learning more and discovering new places, and I loved the comparisons that were drawn there. But he finds a book, and there is something extremely mysterious about this book. I won't say what. Most people, when they give a synopsis, do reveal this, but I personally really enjoyed not knowing what was so mysterious about it. But this sparks him wanting to find out more, needing to know why this book is the way that it is. And he follows it down about 1 million different rabbit holes and ends up in a labyrinth under the earth. I won't say more than that, partially because it's very difficult to explain, and partially because I think that it is really one that if you go in with just that amount of information, you will have the time of your life reading this. There is also a male-male relationship in this book, and I'm always here for LGBT representation, so that's just another plus in this book's arsenal of amazing aspects. And just to give it another sort of boost, there are a lot of cats. I know it's a really small detail, but it was very notable that there are a lot of cats, and it just made me really happy, all these different cats that you meet throughout the way. I can't even begin to describe how much I love the writing in this book. As I said, The Night Circus is one of my favourite books ever, and one of the reasons for that is the stunning, stunning writing style. And unsurprisingly, this follows it very similarly. And again, it's just the most lyrical and beautiful prose, which is honestly the quickest and easiest way to sell me on a book, is beautiful prose. So this is absolutely stunning the way it's written, and I would highly recommend picking it up, especially if you like sort of slightly fantastical fabulism, mystery, books about lost worlds. There's just so much to it, and it's absolutely worth a read. Book number 5 that made it to this list is one that honestly I kind of picked up on a whim. I thought the cover was pretty, I thought the book sounded kind of interesting, so I was like, oh, why not? I may as well pick up a copy and see what I think. And this, I think, is actually probably my favourite of the year. I am obsessed with this book. I remember literally reading the first page, which has about a paragraph of writing on it, and just instantly being like, oh, this is going to be my favourite book, isn't it? There was just no question right from the outset. And that is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. This is the most stunning portal fantasy book I have ever read, and as someone who is absolutely obsessed with portal fantasy, there is no question as to why this is my favourite book that I read last year. The prose in this book is unbelievably beautiful and lyrical, and I would even say flowery, but only in the most positive way. The structure of this is also fascinating because you follow January, who lives in a very nice estate as the ward of a very wealthy man, Mr. Locke, and she doesn't particularly know her family. She vaguely knows her father but hasn't seen him in years, and she finds this mysterious book. And it is through excerpts and large sections of that book and other stories and this book itself that you discover all these intricate details about the plot, and things are really, really slowly revealed. But also the plot itself is absolutely gripping, and you're following so many amazing characters, and there's so much going on, and it is just all told in the most beautiful and entrancing way. And I cannot recommend this book highly enough, honestly. I am just obsessed with it. I cannot wait until I get to reread it and relive it, because it was just an extraordinary experience reading it. So if, like me, you're a fan of lyrical prose and portal fantasy and books about books, then I could not recommend a better book than this. I cannot wait to read what Alex E. Harrow puts out in future, because somehow this is her debut, and I am so excited to read anything else she writes, honestly. This has become instantly one of my favourite authors ever, and I'm so excited to reread this for years to come, I'm sure, as well as read all of her future works. The 5th and final book I have to talk about is actually, I've gone a bit out of order with this. I read this before The Starless E and The 10,000 Doors of January, but I wanted to leave it till last because it is a non-fiction book, so I wanted to sort of group the fiction books together and then talk about this. And I very, very rarely read non-fiction. I only picked this up because one of the readathons I was doing had a prompt of read a non-fiction book, and so I found one lying around on my shelves that looked kind of interesting that I've had for years, and I'm so happy that I did, because it turned out to be one of my favourite books of the year. For those who don't know, Connor Franther is actually a YouTuber, and I've been watching him since I was so young, and I've always thought he was quite interesting, quite funny and quite sweet, but I didn't expect this book to hit me as hard as it did. It is a stunning collection of essays and poetry and photos, all of which were by him. And as well as being stunning in physicality, it actually has photos throughout it which are just beyond beautiful, and it's printed in such a lovely way. And it just really added to it for me as someone who loves photography. Just having those interspersed throughout it just made the book so much more amazing. I actually read his memoir years ago, A Work in Progress, and it was all right, but it was just sort of talking about his life. It was, you know, a memoir. But this, it was essays about experiences he's been through, but it was so much more relatable to me. I was 21 when I read this, and I think he was slightly older when he wrote it. But every single essay, I've got a stupid number of tabs in here, because every single essay, every single poem just really hit home and made me evaluate a lot of things for myself. This is in no way designed to be a self-help book, but honestly, for me, it kind of acted like one. This just really made me think about a lot and reflect on a lot, and I do believe this is one I will continue to go back to for years to come, and will continue to learn things about myself through reading it. And so if you're someone that's interested in just pieces of writing that someone's put together, as well as gorgeous poetry and photography, I would recommend checking this one out, even though it's not normally the sort of book I'd recommend, because it is just a stunning book, both in physicality and in the writing inside it, and it's definitely worth a read. So those are the 5 books that absolutely topped my favourites of the year list, but I do very quickly just want to go really quickly with a super brief synopsis through 7 other books which I really enjoyed and I think deserve a bit of a shout out. And also they're ones where I would continue to read from the author or continue in the series, so I think it's worth kind of very quickly speaking about them. So the first book I want to talk about is All the Invisible Things by Orla Collins, and this is a YA contemporary about a 17-year-old girl whose mother died, and when her mother died, her family all moved away out from London and they've just come back a couple of years later, and she's sort of trying to find her roots again. She's trying to reconnect with her old best friend and work things out with him, but he's got a whole host of issues going on himself. But one of my favourite aspects of this, unsurprisingly, is that the main character is bisexual and she's really working through that and sort of working out about coming out and talking to people about it, which is just really nice to see in with all the other issues it discusses. So this is a very good book and highly underrated. Not enough people have read this book, so definitely go check it out. So continuing on the topic of bisexual rep, the next book I wanted to talk about is Hot Dog Girl by Jennifer Dugan. This is such a fun and sort of silly way contemporary, but also again hits on with some really hard issues. And I think my favourite aspect of this is the main character acts terribly. She really makes a lot of mistakes and purposely acts really badly in a lot of places in this book. But by the end, she's learnt from her mistakes, she's become a much better person, and also there is a female-female relationship in this, which is just adorable. So for a very brief synopsis, this follows Lou, who works at a theme park, but she wears the hot dog costume, which is not the most glamorous, and she has a massive crush on the hot guy who plays the pirate. And in trying to get his attention, she fake dates, brilliant trope, her best friend, another girl, and things get a bit hairy from there, but again, she learns so much throughout the book and it is a really fun and funny read. The next special mention I want to give is The Fever King by Victoria Lee, which is a dystopian which I wish there was more of released today. And this follows Gnome, who lives in a world where there is a magical disease which goes around and frequently kills people, but if you survive it like he did, you often end up with powers. So once he survived, he's put into an institution to learn about these powers. And there's just a brilliant discussion about sort of power struggles and loyalties in this book. And it's really difficult for Gnome to know who to trust and who to believe and who to follow, as there is so much sort of political unrest and so much going on. And I cannot wait to read the sequel, but I need to reread this one first, so I keep putting it off. But soon I will read it and hopefully love it as much as I loved this. And I would definitely recommend checking this one out. So the next book I want to mention is going to be super quick because it was a reread for me, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I reread this because I was going to see her at an event and I wanted to have had it more fresh in my memory before going to see her. Everyone knows what this is about. It's about a circus which appears only at night and it's all very mystical. The prose is beautiful. I don't need to say more. I'm sure I will speak about this a million times in the future, but it's brilliant. I read it again and I will probably read it many more times in the future and love it every single time. The next book I wanted to very quickly talk about is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first Brandon Sanderson book I ever read, and honestly I loved it. It's a YA sci-fi series he's done about a girl who wants to become a fighter jet pilot but can't because of her family's past. And it is so good. There is so many interesting things. I read both Skyward and Starsight, the sequel, last year, and they were brilliant. I absolutely loved them. The writing was great. The characters were phenomenal. And I cannot wait to read the next book in the series, but as far as I'm aware, it's not coming out until 2021, which is really sad. So I'm guessing I'm just gonna have to reread the first 2 before picking it up, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, if you like sci-fi and interesting characters and complex relationships, I would definitely pick this one up, especially if you like rivals to lovers. Just gonna put that in there. So the penultimate book I want to talk about is Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff. I actually read the full Nevernight trilogy last year and loved it, but Dark Dawn really stood out to me. And just as a super quick synopsis for the series as a whole, not the third book, obviously, this follows Mia, who is 16 at the beginning of the series, and she's training to become an assassin to avenge her father's death. And it's brilliant. It's so intense and sort of gory and gruesome, and the language is awful. But that's the point. None of these characters are meant to be super likable or super friendly. They're meant to be kind of awful people, and it's fascinating to read about them. I specifically loved this one. Obviously it's the conclusion, a lot was happening, some characters were in it who I didn't know would come back into the series, which was brilliant. And it got really meta. I'm not gonna say in what way, but if a book gets meta and there's books within books, I'm happy. So definitely one to check out, but obviously start at the beginning of the series. So the very last book I want to shout out, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to hold up, we're going to have to use two hands, is The 100 Nights of Hero by Isabel Greenberg. This is a graphic novel, and I went into this just thinking it was sort of a myth retelling of I think 1001 Nights. But oh my god, I was so pleasantly surprised. This is a female-female romance and it's so amazing. It's obviously not the longest read, even though it's quite chunky because it's a graphic novel. But if you have not picked this up and you have the opportunity to get your hands on it, I could not recommend it highly enough. The illustration style is kind of sketchy, but it's absolutely beautiful. These stories within it are fascinating and the romance is so, so great. So as a final recommendation, definitely pick this one up. So that is it for my favourite books of 2019. I loved all of these books and in my opinion they were the best books I read last year, and they've definitely given me some favourite authors to continue to check out, as well as some series which I'm dying to continue. So yeah, I would obviously highly recommend all of them, and hopefully I've given you an idea throughout this of which books might suit you. And I am so excited to be making another video of this, hopefully in about 6 months instead of in a year, for the best books I read in 2020, because there's already been some amazing books I can't wait to talk about. But that is it for today, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like the video and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me. Comment down below what your favourite books were of 2019. Obviously it was a long time ago, but I am sure that there are some amazing books which I would love to check out this year, so let me know. Bye, and I will see you in the next one.